Alright, so now I sanded down to 220 on the top and on the sides, just with a hand sander, nothing special. But what I'm going to do now is make a, like an iridescent blue type of top with a black stain, and you sand back and add the blue to get a really deep color stain. So what I did is added some black dye pigment into this water mix. I used the transtint mixes. They're really good mixes. They sand well, they evenly go in to the wood. They're real popular for anyone doing any type of staining. So these trans mixes are great. Essentially what I want to do is I want to really soak in my little towel that I've got, make sure it gets really nice and wet, and then from there just start wiping in this deep dark stain. And what this deep dark stain does is it really dyes into the pores, and when I come back and sand off, I'll have just some really dark stain deep into the pores, and when I add the blue I'll get that really neat, Paul Reed Smith faded top. So as I add this first coat of dye, I want to make sure that I get it nice and even and uniform across the top. Make sure I get all the corners and whatnot. And really just take my time rubbing this in all over the place. Usually leave it pretty wet, and I'll go over this 3 or 4 times with the same stain. That way I know I've got a nice even deep color, and that way I don't have any holes or whatnot. The thing is about putting binding on is that you got to get all the binding glue off before you do this step. I've seen people try to do this step without having the binding clean off the body, and then you get splotches everywhere. Same thing with glue. If you have glue marks left over, you will still see the glue as you're doing the stain, because it covers up the pores. So you need a fresh open sanded piece here. And once you get that, you'll begin to see the other sanding lines that you have to take out when you sand again. So right here I've got some grain marks that I got to take out from the 100 grit sandpaper I was using on the drum sander. Getting a really nice thick coat here on the second rub down. We'll do one more time here, another thick coat. What's nice about this water now is it also has raised the grain, so that way any of the sanding marks I have on here, next time I sand, all this will come off because I've picked up the grain so significantly from adding this amount of water and dye. Alright, so what I'm going to do next is sand down the top. I get my sander, and now that this is all dry, I'm essentially this isn't a very aggressive sander. I'm going to get my vacuum cleaner, suck up the dust. I'm going to sand this down so that I get little bits of black left into the wood. Don't really advise doing this inside, but since I want to film this, I'm going to do this inside. So I'll show you how much I sand back. I start with a real light grit, 320, and then I'll work myself up to about 400. And just taking a little bit off so I get an even color everywhere. So now you can see I've got most of the black sanded off. Got a couple of sections right here I'll take care of, but you can see it comes off pretty thick. But once you clean this up with a little naphtha, you'll just get the black left. Alright, so now we've got the top essentially sanded off pretty finely. Got a nice coating of the black off. I leave just a little bit. What I'll do now is I'll get some naphtha and I'll wipe the top down, and then next I'll put my gloves back on and start staining with the blue. And I'll do lighter blue on the outside and do darker blue in the center and do like a poor man's burst. Alright, so now I'm going to clean this up with some naphtha. And why do I use naphtha? Because it doesn't raise the grain like water will. And at this point I really don't need to raise the grain anymore, since I've already put a really heavy soaking on. So naphtha will clean out the pores. Not that there's a lot of pores on maple, but I'll get a nice clean surface now to work with. Alright, now that the naphtha is all dry here, I use a blue turquoise from Transfast. It's a different company. It's always easier to start lighter and then go darker, so I'm going to put a light base on here of the blue, and then I'll put darker in the middle as I go along. So start out with a nice blue. Essentially same process as before. I want to saturate the wood to get a nice even color. And make sure you get it all over the place here. And like I said, when you go lighter, life is much easier. I've gone dark and then I end up resanding and end up just making a big mess. So when you start lighter, you can add color and add color and add color, but it's very hard to take away color once it's been added. Again, this is another water-based dye, so it will pick up the grain, but the more I keep sanding off, the less that'll be left on. So it's really good to work this in. I'll probably again do 3 or 4 coats to get that nice thick color, kind of that time to go for a swim color. And already you can see it's a pretty good dark blue on this left side here. And as I move the blue across to the other side, get that same look. And what's nice about the wet look, as you're putting it on, you'll begin to see what this guitar looks like when it's finished. So I'll seal this in nitro on the top, and I'll oil this back and sides with like a true oil. Whole guitar does not need to be finished in lacquer. Plus it's winter here, and lacquer does not go on very well in the winter, so I'll just do the top very nicely. So again, I've got almost 2 coats of water on this. Got that really nice deep color. And the more blue you continue to add on, the richer the color gets. So I'll continue to just add this nice dark deep blue, and you get this incredible look on the top when you get the nice colors lined up. Like I said, you just got to keep rubbing the colors in. It's almost like finger painting to make sure all the colors in on all the different spots. I actually may just leave this color because it does look pretty spectacular like this versus going a little bit darker in the center. What you could do, and what I've done in the past, is I've sanded this all one color and then take the sander again, go over it, add the darker in the middle, and then do the lights on the side, and you can still get that poor man's burst. So depending on how this dries out, I may go one of 2 ways, but we'll see. I'm not sure if I like this blue turquoise salt so much, so what I'm going to do is I've got a transtint blue, a straight blue color, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing the edges here now and add a little bit more depth to this color. So now I'm going to essentially feather it around on the edges to get a little bit darker, deeper blue. I'm going to see what that looks like. So what I do is just keep going around here, same process as yesterday, and create like a feathered look. And what you do then is you go back over it with the turquoise blue, and you get that fading then, that poor man's burst. Now the key here is just to get it so it looks correct in terms of the fade. So you go, an inch in on each side or whatnot to get the coloring correct. So now I'll have a deep, darker blue on the outside and a lighter blue on the inside. So that's enough dark blue. Really didn't use a whole lot. But now as I put the turquoise back on, it'll be, you'll watch how it bleeds in here. Alright, so here's the turquoise blue now. And you see as you're starting to go over it, the color fades in pretty good. The trick here is to keep turning so you don't take the turquoise or the darker blue across the whole wood, that you've only got the turquoise in the middle and the darker on the side. So the trick is to keep turning the sponge or rag or whatever you're using so that you keep the lighter in the middle and the darker on the outside. So I'll keep doing that here, make sure I get a nice turquoise color. And then if you don't like it or you still see some fading, what you do is you take the turquoise again on the outside and you rub it back in so you get that fade out. So when you see when it's wet in one spot versus another, you just go ahead and rub the turquoise to get the fade. So now I've got a little bit lighter here and a little bit darker here. Probably what I'll end up doing here is sanding back one more time to make sure I get the blue just in the middle, the light turquoise blue versus on the outer. That way you can peel back everything and you still have the look that you're going for. It's not really turning dark enough on the outside here, so I'm going to go ahead then and add just a titch of black back to the outside so I can get that really good fade. So I've got my handy black. What I like to do is dip the black in its own brush and then dip that back into the blue. That way I'm not getting total black, I'm still getting a little mix. And then what I do is just wipe it very carefully on the outer here, because if you do too much it will all show. So now I've got much darker blue on the outside here, and I'll get a new cloth and use the turquoise in the middle. But now I've got a really good fade here. This is what I was looking for. Alright, so now I've got the black on the outer, and I'm going to take a new fresh cloth and wipe the turquoise back on in the middle. And again, I'll turn the cloth here so I've only got the blue, light blue in the middle and the dark on the edge. Trick is to go back over with the turquoise on the outer so you don't get a hard line, that you get that feathering that you're looking for. A lot of people just stop and don't do the feathering and it doesn't look right because you don't get the good mix of colors back in. So it's really key, and you see this is turned black, to keep turning this and go back over with the turquoise. Alright, so here's the biggest trick that most people don't get as they're doing this towards the end. Now that this top is all dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 600 grit sandpaper and sand off the top one more time, and then I'm going to hit it with blue, a light turquoise blue once more, and that'll get it to really pop. So I'll get a little bit rid of the darkness and get that one more. I'll get all the fading that you see here on the edge, but I'll get that one more pop. So I'm going to go ahead and sand it off with some 600 grit, real light, and I'll show you that here in a second. Alright, so here's the guitar with it sanded back once more. It's probably not as light as I was looking for it, so I've got the darker edges here. Now I've got a lighter in the middle. Probably what I'll do one more time now is sand it with 600 again and then hit it with the blue. That way I can get a little bit more dark out of the center here and get a little bit more kind of turquoise looking. So I'll do that once more. I'll sand with 600 and take the blue once more, and we'll see what that does. Alright, so here's the body in its glory. I've got darker on the edge that's been bled out a little bit when I dab the water, and I've got lighter in the center. So as you flip through the body here, it's definitely a poor man's burst. Other trick you can do is, if you want to take some color out, you can just rub water with a wet rag and it'll begin to pull some color out. Or if you want, you can sand with the 600 grit and you'll pull layers off. Sanding is a little bit more of a pain. You get less control. But essentially the body's done. I've got to do seal the edges now, final sand the back, scrape the binding, and I'll actually probably finish it. Was going to lacquer the top, kind of second guessing that now, but we'll see.